Argentina on the cusp of an historic abortion vote, thousands gathering outside Parliament as the Senate debates the legislation. No national lockdown in France. Instead, the government considering extending the curfew in the worst affected regions. This as officials in the east of the country say more aggressive measures are needed to combat COVID-19. And the search for survivors continues in Croatia after the 6.4 magnitude earthquake there. 7 people have been confirmed killed, and officials fear that number is likely to rise. Those are the world news headlines this hour. I'm Nadia Massi in Paris. Thank you very much for joining us. We start the programme then in Argentina, which could be on the brink of legalising abortion. The Senate is currently debating the bill, which has already been approved by the lower house of Parliament. It is a highly emotive issue in this Catholic country, home of Pope Francis, and previous attempts to legalise abortion have failed. But this time, the move is being championed by the country's president, Alberto Fernandez. For the latest, let's cross now to Buenos Aires and talk to our reporter there, Declan McGarvey. Declan, an historic vote in Parliament today then, and outside, thousands of people have been gathering, many of them supporting a woman's right to choose. You were there among those protesters a short while ago. Tell us a bit about the atmosphere.
Well, as the lawmakers debate this abortion bill within the nation's parliament, there are thousands of activists gathering outside the parliament building in the National Square that faces it. Now, they include pro-life campaigners who are holding a midnight vigil of prayer outside the parliament building, but they are vastly outnumbered by the many thousands of women's rights activists who are expectantly waiting for the result of this abortion debate and vote. Now, if it is a yes vote, it will be a historic moment for Argentina. It will overturn Argentina's very strict abortion laws, which permit abortion only in very specific circumstances, namely those of rape or where a woman's health or life is deemed to be at risk. It will end the criminalization of abortion in Argentina, which sees women sentenced to prison for undergoing illegal abortions, and it will end women's rights. Activists say will end a situation in Argentina which sees, according to official estimates, some 500,000 illegal, clandestine and often unsafe abortions take place in Argentina each year, often at the expense of women's health and their lives. Now, one women's rights activist I spoke to just a few minutes ago in front of the Parliament building said to me that she really hopes that this bill passed, that it would make her happy, so happy, and she said that it would make a big change for women that have died and for those that have struggled for this cause.
Now, Declan, we expect the vote to be extremely close today. When do you think we'll get a decision from Parliament?
Well, this debate has already been ongoing for some 10 hours, and it's expected to continue for another 2 to 3 hours before a final vote is known. Now, as we're speaking now on the big screens in front of the Parliament building, the thousands of activists who are gathered there can see the nation's lawmakers debating this bill. They're each given 10 minutes to give their views on this abortion bill and also give their voting intentions. And we know by the declarations of those voting intentions that the yes vote has pulled ahead by a margin as significantly as 5 or 6 votes. So it seems that Argentina could be on the cusp of a historic watershed moment. The homeland of Pope Francis could about to become the first major country in Latin America to legalize abortion. Latin America, of course, the world's most Catholic region and home to over 420 million Catholics.
All right, Declan McGarvey, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed. As he was just saying there, we are expecting that news from Argentina in the next couple of hours. We'll be sure to bring it to you as soon as we get it. Now, staying in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean have now become the second region after Europe to top 500,000 deaths from COVID-19. More than a third of those deaths occurred in Brazil. And like Brazil, Mexico is currently struggling with a new wave of infections. Authorities in Mexico City have imposed a partial shutdown, and doctors there are warning that cases could spike still further after the holiday period. Now, here in France, there are currently no plans for another national lockdown. That is according to the country's health minister. Instead, the current curfew may be brought forward from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m., this in regions that are particularly badly affected. Have a listen to the health minister.
Nous allons proposer une extension du couvre-feu qui, au lieu de démarrer à 20h, démarrera à 18h dans l'ensemble des territoires dans lesquels ça s'avérera nécessaire, de ces régions dans lesquelles le taux d'incidence serait au-dessus du seuil d'alerte maximale. Nous avons besoin de voir l'effet de Noël. S'il y a un effet de Noël, il faut pour cela au moins une semaine de recul, l'effet éventuellement du Nouvel An. Nous espérons qu'il sera évidemment le plus faible possible. Et donc d'ici début janvier, nous y verrons plus clair sur la situation sanitaire. Mais de toute évidence, on ne pourra pas lever la totalité des contraintes.
So while the government may be against a national lockdown for now, in some regions, particularly in the east of France, officials are calling for local shutdowns, as Catherine Bennett now reports.
This is the daily reality for this intensive care unit in a hospital in Nancy in eastern France, looking after COVID-19 patients. In 48 hours, 4 more cases have come in. Staff here have been working intensively for the last 8 months and are feeling the strain.
Parce qu'on a déjà vécu la première vague dans la région, on a de plein fouet. Et c'est inquiétant, c'est sûr. Même si on est préparé, même si on sait ce qu'il faut faire, c'est quelque chose qui nous inquiète. Oui.
In this intensive care ward, COVID patients are put in with non-COVID patients, meaning that almost every single bed is occupied, and the hospital will have to create more space.
On est presque saturé. On a beaucoup de patients en médecine Covid, et donc mathématiquement, on va avoir des patients en réanimation Covid dans les jours qui vont suivre, dans les semaines qui vont suivre. Et le 31 décembre n'est pas encore passé.
In Nancy, the end-of-year holidays have been ruined by the spike in cases, but many residents accept the prospect of stricter measures.
Si ça permet aussi de retrouver un peu de confiance et de stabilité au quotidien, ça peut aussi être une chose pratique.
Moi, j'irai jusqu'au reconfinement.
Pourquoi ?
C'est plus sécurisant, je pense.
A number of politicians in the region are calling for local lockdowns. One of them is the mayor of Nancy.
J'ai évoqué le confinement car, jusqu'à ce jour, je n'ai pas connaissance d'alternatives efficaces pour limiter la pression de la Covid-19, faire diminuer le nombre de contaminations.
In Nancy, the rate of cases is now up to 247 per 100,000 population, almost twice as much as the national average.
Well, meanwhile, COVID-19 cases are surging in the United Kingdom as concern is growing about a more contagious variant of the coronavirus. Britain has, for the second day running, recorded its highest daily number of cases, over 53,000. The number of patients in hospital in England is now greater than it was during the first lockdown back in April. With the details, here's Catherine Viette.
An explosion of cases has the government scrambling to combat the latest wave of the pandemic. Thanks to a new strain of COVID-19, which spreads much more quickly, hospitals across the UK are now treating more coronavirus patients than during the first wave's peak in April.
The volume of sick patients coming in with coronavirus is verging on unmanageable just in terms of ambulance capacity, A&E capacity and bed capacity.
Officials are sounding the alarm, warning that things will get worse before they get better.
I think it's an incredibly serious, incredibly dangerous moment. This remains a very infectious, very harsh, very lethal virus, except even more so than when we started talking about this in February and March.
Many in England are already under Tier 4 restrictions. That's the toughest level, which includes stay-at-home orders and the closure of non-essential shops. The government is considering extending those restrictions to the rest of the country as part of an effort to alleviate strain on the National Health Service.
This is something that we've just never experienced before. There are more patients calling 999 and 111 than we have ever seen in the past, and that data is an absolute fact. There are so many patients that need our help now.
In some areas, COVID patients are being treated in ambulances because hospitals have run out of beds. The government is pinning its hopes on its mass vaccination program to help slow the virus's spread.
Well, meanwhile, in the US state of California, lockdown measures have been extended there by officials, as doctors are also warning about hospital beds running low there because of coronavirus. In the last few days alone, in Los Angeles County, 90% of hospitals have been forced to divert emergency patients. This comes as Joe Biden has warned that across the United States, the vaccination drive is behind schedule. The Trump administration had planned to vaccinate 20 million Americans by the end of this year, but so far, just over 2 million people have received the jab. Here is President-elect Biden.
And the pace of the vaccination program is moving now, if it continues to move as it is now. It's going to take years, not months, to vaccinate the American people. But even with that improvement, even if we boost the speed of vaccinations to 1 million shots a day, it will still take months to have the majority of the United States population vaccinated.
Let's have a look now at some of the other top stories we're following for you this hour. A court in Shenzhen, China, has sentenced 10 democracy activists to up to 3 years in prison for trying to flee Hong Kong. The group were involved in pro-democracy demonstrations in the city earlier this year. Lawyers say they've been denied access to their clients. 2 police officers have been fired in the US city of Louisville, Kentucky. This for their role in the death of Breonna Taylor. The 26-year-old was shot 6 times when police forces worked their way into her home back in March. Her story then became a rallying cry during the Black Lives Matter protests. And 1 Syrian soldier has been killed during an Israeli airstrike near Damascus. This is according to Syrian state media. 3 other people were wounded at the military site. Meanwhile, Hezbollah positions near the Lebanese border were also reportedly targeted. Israel has declined to comment. Now, a frantic search for survivors is underway in Croatia after a 6.4 magnitude earthquake struck the country. At least 7 people have been killed and that death toll is expected to rise. Monty Francis has this update.
As night fell, aid workers set up tents for the thousands of people displaced by a massive earthquake. Bulldozers sifted through the debris while the search continued for people trapped beneath the rubble. The 6.4 magnitude quake struck Croatia earlier in the day, the moments caught on live television. The heaviest damage was concentrated in and around Petrinja, a town of around 20,000 south of Croatia's capital, Zagreb.
Grozno, ne? Baš užas. Užas. Ljudi zazivaju vojsku. Vojska je tu. Vojska je tu I vojarna može primiti nekoliko stotina ljudi, obitelji, ali baš užas.
In the hours that followed, many were afraid to return to their homes in fear of aftershocks.
Primjer radi moja osobno kuća I od supruge, razumijete, znači krova nema. Razumijete, sad zidovi kao zidovi imaju, ali vam je to sve ispucalo, popucalo, to vam je, primjer radi, čovjek se ni ne usudi ući unutra.
Izgubila sam, da, dom I eto, ne mogu pričat.
The European Mediterranean Seismological Center said an estimated 6 million people had felt the earthquake, judged to be one of the strongest to ever hit Croatia and felt as far away as Vienna. The government said Croatian soldiers have been deployed to the area to help rescue crews search for survivors.
Well, that's it from us in the newsroom for this bulletin, but there is just time to leave you with a little bit of music. This is the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra practicing for their New Year's concert. Now, of course, because of the coronavirus this year, it will be played without a live audience, but the show goes on and the recording will be broadcast in 90 countries this New Year's Day. Have a listen. On that note, thank you for watching.